a Neanderthal. So toxic, but I can't get enough. You bury me, bury me. Yeah, you bury me, bury me. You've got me hypnotized. Me out of myself. You've got me hypnotized. Whoa. I can see, I can hear, going crazy for the luck. It's got me hypnotized. You've got me hypnotized. Can you hold my hand again?
And boom, just like that, it's Thursday night, and you know what that means. It's party time with the Video Bros. I'm Bobby Munson, and the man beside me, the man with the angelic voice, Papa Smokes. Papa Smokes, how are you doing, brother?
Munson, I'm doing great. Another awesome Thursday night. I'm here. I'm ready to go. How are you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. Very fantastic, because we got a very special guest joining us here today for what we're calling part 2 of our trip through the territories, Calgary Stampede. So I'm going to let the intro roll. We're going to bring our special guest in right now here to join us. Yes, Papa Smokes, we are very honored to have with us a very special guest at this time, Ross Hart. Welcome to our trip through the territories. Thank you very much for doing this show here today.
Pleasure to be here, guys. Can you see me okay?
We can see you perfectly fine, hear you loud and clear as well, too. And yeah, very appreciative of this. This opportunity came about because our mutual friend, Rachel, had reached out to you. She was a guest on our show when we did part 1 of our trip through the territories. And we're very honored to have you here with us, and we wanted to talk to you a little bit about your career and time with Stampede Wrestling, and kind of get a little bit more familiar with Stampede as we try to educate our listeners here as much as possible about the territory days of professional wrestling.
Yeah, it'll be a lot of fun for me to relive some memories and share some old anecdotes and stories, and hopefully relive some great moments and experiences, and pass on any wisdom that I can to the current generation of wrestlers and fans out there.
Perfect. Sounds good. As we're getting started here, we will say hello to our chat. Hello, Astrid. Hey, thank you for joining us on the show here tonight. BDJ joining us up in the house. Welcome to the best live wrestling pod in the prairie, says Ross. Well, thank you, BDJ. We are checks in the mail. Ed saying hello to Ross, and also adding that he says hello to Papa Smokes and myself, Money Munson, as well, too. And we got our good friend Basser up in the house as well, saying good evening, gents. Yes, thank you, everybody, for tuning in. If you have questions, Make sure you get them in the chat, and we will try our best to get those in. But, Ross, I wanted to start off by kind of getting you to familiarize the fans, the listeners here on our show, a little bit about your career start, how you kind of broke into the biz, and a little bit about the early days of Stampede Wrestling.
Yeah, well, I'll try not to digress or get sidetracked too much, because I had a lot of different roles with the Stampede Wrestling promotion. One of which was performing in the ring as a wrestler, but I guess more importantly, I did a lot of work behind the scenes. I was a TV producer for the Stampede Wrestling show from about 1978 to 1989, and I did a lot of the publicity work, I guess, sending press releases out to the different towns and sponsorships that we were working with. I also trained a lot of guys in the dungeon, in the basement of the Hart family. I worked a lot with my brothers Bruce and Keith, and trained a lot of young guys that were breaking into the business. I did just about everything from setting up rings to working security to sending out the releases to the TV production work, and then occasionally performing in the ring as a wrestler. So I think I covered it all, and probably had the greatest variety of roles of anyone in my family. But I certainly didn't have as celebrated a career in the ring as Brett and Keith. But Brett and Owen, excuse me, but Bruce and Keith also were really successful performers as well. But I did a lot behind the scenes, and work that I'm pretty proud of.
Well, awesome. Papa Smokes, I'm going to go to you. I know you've got tons of questions here, so I'm going to let you roll with this one, my friend.
Yeah, thanks again, Ross, for doing this. This is a huge pleasure to have you on the show. I wanted to bring up the days before the heyday that we all know of Stampede Wrestling, probably from the late 70s through the 80s. But before that, Stu had established the foundations for a pretty strong promotion, and Calgary was already on the map as a wrestling town with NWA champions defending their titles in Calgary. Can you talk to us a little bit about that time?
Yeah, my dad had a weekly territory, and he ran 52 weeks of the year, which was pretty amazing. And our biggest shows of the year usually were during our Calgary Stampede in July, and that's when you would really showcase some of the bigger names in wrestling. Usually the NWA World Champion would come in and make defenses of the title in Calgary and Edmonton and the other major cities, Saskatoon, Regina, all over Western Canada. But we usually would have two major shows in Calgary and Edmonton on the weekends for the entire Stampede. And as far back as the early 50s, my dad would always bring in the NWA heavyweight champion to defend against our top star, who is usually the North American heavyweight champion, sort of the recognized singles heavyweight title holder in the Stampede circuit. But a few times we did feature some other world champions. I think my dad brought in Bruno Sammartino one time, I think in 1964, to defend the title. And then we kind of broke away from the NWA in the early 80s and brought in Nick Bockwinkel as the AWA World Heavyweight Champion through the 80s to defend titles. So at different times we featured World Heavyweight Champions, but we'd also bring in big attractions like Andre the Giant and, even guys who were former champions but would come in for the big shows during the Stampede, like the Funks and Harley Race and some of them. So, but we had a really good circuit. We had established wrestlers that would be here all year, and then usually the year's shows would climax at the Stampede, and at that time, whoever was the top singles star would get a shot at the World Heavyweight Champion. And then in later years, we established the World Mid Heavyweight Championship for the lighter weight divisions, and we had like two major divisions then, and then the tag team division as well. So, but I think my dad had a really good promotion, and we established a lot of our own stars, but we would always try to bring in some of the bigger names as well.
Perfect. I've got a bit of a two-part question. One is, who was your favorite opponent in Stampede Wrestling to work with? And the second part would be, who was your favorite person to work with as a promoter?
Well, I think my favorite opponents probably were the Cuban Assassin and Jerry Morrow, who wrestled as the Cuban Commandos. They were the tag team champions, I think, in 88, 89. And they had been established stars. They had been there for years, and they were really two of the best tag team aces you could find, because they had been successful with other tag teams in the past. Cuban Assassin had been tag team champions with different partners as the Cuban Assassin #2. He was always #1, Angel Acevedo, and then he had been tag team champions with a number of other partners, and then Jerry Morrow had been tag team champions on a number of occasions with his brother Eddie, and then other different partners. So they were two excellent tag team guys. Whether they're when they were a team, they were heels, but they just called a really good match. They were safe to work with, and they could make anybody look good. The greenest or I guess least capable of anybody, they could get a good match out of, just because they were such good ring generals, and they always worked to to compensate for the limitations of their opponents or their styles, and they would always have phenomenal matches, and then they would sell their asses off for you. They would take great bumps, and all you had to do is listen to them. Their psychology was so good. They would just lead you through a whole match, and they were probably my favorite tag team to work with, of all time, just because I always had fun against them, and they were just experienced ring generals, and they made it entertaining for the fans and the wrestlers alike, and they'd always make you look good no matter what the outcome was. But favorite promoters to deal with, I didn't deal directly with a lot of promoters myself, but my dad did, and I know he had very favorable things to say about Frank Tunney, who ran the Toronto office with the NWA. And there were a few others that were really easy to deal with in terms of talent exchanges and sending different wrestlers to us. The Rougeaus in Montreal were quite good. They sent us Abdullah the Butcher, I think, 1970, and he became a huge star for us. But, my dad had really good partnerships or working alliances with promoters all over Canada and the States. And it was a great arrangement because we could exchange talent with different promotions. And if we had a wrestler here that had been here a little too long and they needed to go somewhere else, to get a change of face and get some experience, and they wouldn't get overexposed on our promotion, my dad would work with other promotions. Sometimes Emile Dupre in the Maritimes, he was a good one to work with as well. All-Star Wrestling in Vancouver with Sandor Kovacs, Don Owen in Portland, Oregon, the Funks in Amarillo, Texas, Mike and Gene LaBelle in LA. So, my dad had a really good working arrangement, and we would trade a lot of wrestlers. And then, of course, we had really good ties with the Japanese offices. I think with all three offices, the IWE, which was the oldest established office, and it ran until the early 80s, and then with New Japan and All Japan as well.
Awesome. We do have a question coming in from the audience here that I'm going to bring up. Whether or not you want to share in this question, we'll see. Papa Smokes will go to you right after this, but BDJ's saying that his dad grew up on Stampede Wrestling, loved when you'd come through the Saskatoon area. Any good backstage shenanigans that you care to share with us about the Saskatoon shows?
Yeah, a few funny anecdotes, and you have to be careful sometimes because you don't want to bring up a story that might be a little embarrassing or, kind of not an insult, I guess, but maybe, the laugh was on a particular wrestler. But my dad was, a really good promoter to work for, but he was sometimes gruff the way he spoke with wrestlers, and he was quite blunt sometimes too. If he saw someone who didn't look very big, he would be pretty blunt about that and say, "You're not too big, are you?" Or something like that. And but for the most part, he was always very respectful of wrestlers and treated them well. And my dad, I think almost any promoter, any wrestler who worked for Stampede would say my dad was a person of his word and had a lot of honor, and he always paid guys what he promised. He paid guarantees to a lot of wrestlers to get them to come up and work in in Western Canada, where it was pretty remote and far away from other promotions, and it was cold and long road trips as well. But my dad was often mocked a lot, because of his way of speaking, and sort of the way I speak too. Sometimes a lot of stuttering and pauses between sentences. But he had some pretty funny interactions with some wrestlers. But one that I remember was quite comical was with Cowboy Lang, who's a midget wrestler. This was, I think, back in 1980, and Cowboy Lang was working with another Japanese midget wrestler called Little Tokyo, and was supposed to be for the World Midget Championship. And Cowboy Lang was not far from Calgary. He was actually from a place called Rimby near Red Deer. And so we had arranged for a title change in Calgary, where Cowboy Lang would beat Little Tokyo for the title. And it would be just sort of a title change only our territory would recognize. It was before, magazines and TV exposure became larger, and fans would know what had happened in other promotions. So we had Cowboy Lang win the title from Little Tokyo in Calgary. It was a televised match, and Cowboy was so excited. He was so happy he'd won the title, and I think one of the wrestlers actually had some champagne, and they poured it all over Cowboy after the match. But anyway, as it turned out, that night there was another event kind of going on in the Stampede grounds close to the pavilion, and there was this chimp that was featured in these movies with Clint Eastwood. I can't remember the name of the chimp, but I think the movie was called Every Which Way But Loose, and the chimp was being featured at a trade show, sort of like a Comic-Con or something in one of the other buildings, and his owner came over to the pavilion to watch some of the wrestling matches. And anyway, my dad thought it would be a really good photo opportunity for Cowboy Lang, being a midget, to pose with the chimp, and just take some photos together. He thought it would be a good PR. But anyway, some of the wrestlers, I think my brother Bruce and a few others, kind of heard beforehand what was happening. So they spoke with Cowboy, who was just beaming after he had won the title, and got a standing ovation from the fans, and had been doused with champagne. And I think my brother Bruce or someone spoke to Cowboy and said, they want you to drop the belt to the chimp. And he says, what? And I said, well, Stu wants you to drop the belt to the chimp and put the chimp over. And Cowboy took it so seriously, and he didn't realize it was just a rib, and all Stu wanted was for Cowboy to take a picture with his chimp, and anyway, and Cowboy said, well, I just won the title. He said, you want me to drop it already? He says, I ain't dropping it to a fucking chimp, I said, that's bad for business, and anyway, we said, well, that's what Stu wants, Cowboy, and you might have to go along with it, because this is a chimp, that's a major celebrity, and it was in these movies with Clint Eastwood, and Cowboy was fussing and fuming about it, and his title reign was going to come to a quick end, but nobody had even explained to him what was going to happen. If it was going to be out in the ring in front of the fans, or just out in the dressing room area. Nobody even explained that to Cowboy. They just said, you got to drop the belt, champ. So so anyway, my dad then signaled for Cowboy to come over and take a picture. Say, Cowboys, hey, can I talk to you for a second? Let's just see if we can do some PR here and get a picture of you and this chimp. And Cowboy came up to my dad. He says, Stu, he says, I ain't doing it. He says, no way. He says, I ain't putting the chimp over, or something like that. My dad was kind of hard of hearing, and he couldn't understand why Cowboy was being so reluctant. And my dad says, what the hell do you mean? He said, I ain't doing it, Stu. I ain't putting the chimp over, or something. And Stu just saw that as a refusal to take a picture with the chimp. He thought maybe he was belittling to have a photo taken with the chimpers, and my dad said, oh, then do whatever the fuck you want, you little shit, my dad was just so pissed off because he just thought it was a missed opportunity for good PR, and he and Cowboy were on totally different wavelengths. Cowboy thought Stu wanted him to put the chimp over and drop the title to him, and Stu just thought he was being a prima donna and didn't want to take a picture with an animal, with the chimp. So that was kind of one of those funnier moments, and there was a lot of ribbing that sometimes went on, and sometimes my dad was kind of the intended target because he wasn't there all the time, among the wrestlers, and because he was hard of hearing, sometimes he didn't pick on some things, pick up on some things like that. So, but that was one of those more humorous moments. But at least it was a rib that didn't hurt anybody. It wasn't where somebody got halcyoned or got X-laxed or something like that. So some of those jokes were pretty harsh and pretty painful for some of the wrestlers. But sometimes that went on, and there's the classic Mabel parties as well, where a wrestler was set up on a blind date somewhere on a remote area or farm, and Dave Rule usually was the one that was setting those up, and my dad was kind of aware of it, but he didn't take part. But he didn't really intervene or put a stop to it either. So it was done with quite a few wrestlers, where they were brought out to some remote farm. It actually happened to be some farm, I think, that Dave Rule's brother Henry owned or something. It would be somewhere about 40 kilometers north of Calgary, and it's usually on a cold winter day, and it would be like November, December, -20 weather, and this farm was pretty far away from major highways and roads, but these wrestlers would be brought out to meet a woman named Mabel, and it was supposed to be a sort of a blind date, but it had to be a secrecy. No one could know about it, and Dave would take the wrestler out in a car and say, Mabel's basically ready to meet with you. We've really put you over, and told her how handsome you are and what a big stud you are, and how long you are, basically. And so anyway, the poor unsuspecting wrestlers were sort of in a room in this farmhouse waiting, for Mabel to come out, and there would be some gigglish noises coming from one of the rooms, and say, "I'll be right out," or something like that. And it was, basically someone just sort of impersonating Mabel. But then all of a sudden there would be a gunshot fired, and Dave Rule, who was sort of the liaison setting up Mabel with the wrestler, apparently would have been shot by Mabel's husband, who came home and interceded and found out, what was going on. And all of a sudden Dave would come out, and, there'd be red dye on his shirt. It looked like he got a gunshot wound to the chest. And he would tell the wrestlers, run off, take off, run for your life. Mabel's husband has just shot me. So the poor wrestler then would run outside, quite often without a jacket or anything, and they'd be running, for hundreds of yards and then miles, and then realizing they had no idea where they were going. It was at nighttime, and trying to flag a car down or an RCMP, and huffing and puffing, and then eventually I think they would hitchhike or alert some motorist, and then just get a ride back to Calgary. And one case usually they'd call my dad and say, Dave Rule's been shot. Dave was the booker for my dad, and my dad would say, what? And my dad would sort of be letting on, not letting on that he knew what was happening, and said, Dave's been shot. He'd set me up for a date with a woman named Mabel, and he came out of the bedroom and someone had shot him, and I ran for my life, Stu, and I think Dave's dead, and so, and my dad said, well, I'll look into it. And then a few days later, at the next town, the next show, Dave would show up at the show, and the guy would say, what happened to you, Dave? I thought you got shot. And Dave said, yeah, he grazed me, but he just nicked me, and I got out of there luckily, and just escaped with my life because he took a few more shots at me, and he was looking for you as well. So, but this was done a few times over the years. I think the Vachons first did it with the great Antonio, with Dave Rule back in the late 50s. And then about every 3-4 years, we did it with different wrestlers. I think one time with a guy named Don Jardine, who wrestled as the Spoiler, and then some guy named Mel McWilliams, I guess. But one case, though, one of the wrestlers, I think it might have been Mel McWilliams, who was a guy that was just sort of breaking in, and he got it pretty bad because he had run outside for I think a mile or two, and then flagged a RCMP car down. And anyway, they drove over to where the Mabel party had supposedly taken place, and it was just a bar in there, and nobody was there. Everybody had left. Everybody that was involved in the prank, and then the police were searching there. They had flashlights on and everything because it was late at night. And then they called my dad, on the phone, and said there was a suspected shooting, at a farmyard here, and at some kind of a arranged date. And and anyway, so the police were kind of investigating it, and my dad kind of had to downplay it and said, I don't know what the hell was going on. I don't know anything about it, So, but after that, my dad didn't encourage too many more of the Mabel parties because the RCMP were kind of onto it, and they probably would have filed some charges of mischief. But I think the last one that happened was around 1970. But those were some pretty classic behind the scenes pranks that happened.
Well, while Mabel is still at large here in Canada, being looked for by the RCMP, we're going to go over to a question from Ed Fries. Wants to know, Ross, what wrestling promotions do you watch now if you need a wrestling fix?
I watch WWE and AEW as often as I can. And that's about it. Occasionally I'll watch some tapings from Japan as well. But, I know there's a lot of good independents out there as well, and there's so much that's on YouTube. But I guess for the most part, WWE and AEW.
Okay. Bob Smokes, we're going to go back over to you. Get to your next question there, sir.
Sure. Ross, you were talking about your role with production, and I was curious as to what process you guys went through to get the show from the live taping or the live tapes onto TV. How much time did you have to turn it around, and what kind of was the process involved with that?
Yeah, it was a pretty fast process. We would film on a Friday night at the Pavilion in Calgary, and that would be the TV show that went to all the other cities and stations. Would air in Calgary the next day. So we would have to edit the show Friday night after the matches. Sometimes it would take 6 or 7 hours, and a lot of times we had so much footage, it had to be a 60-minute show, actually about 48 minutes with TV commercials, which were just dubbed in. So, and a lot of times we had way too much content. A lot of the interviews went over their expected length. So sometimes we'd have to edit 30-40 minutes out of the show and condense it to a 1-hour program. So our show was quite good. It didn't have a lot of the 3 or 4 camera angles that other promotions did. Certainly WWE introduced really high-tech TV production with better lights, I guess, and additional camera angles and crowd shots. Ours was pretty basic, compared to them. But as far as ring action, though, I think our show was as entertaining as any. We didn't really thrive on the studio type formats of matches. We'd usually just pick up a match in progress and at least show the finish or conclusion, and then the angles, that would emanate from that, and then interviews as well. So we tried to make it as entertaining as possible, but still try to promote the out of town shows that were coming up, and that was really our bread and butter. We'd spend quite a bit on TV production, and so we had to make that money back from the live shows that we had, and sometimes those were our best shows, was when we ran with the hockey clubs and the wrestling clubs, and sometimes these different sponsors and organizations in smaller towns and even the reserves. We'd get really good turnouts, sometimes 700-800 people at a spot show, and all we had to pay for was our transportation basically, and the wrestlers, and the rest of that was kind of a profit. So unlike Calgary and Edmonton, where we had to pay bigger rent and we had to pay fees to the boxing and wrestling commissions, and obviously more for advertising and TV production. Some of the smaller shows out of town were the most profitable for us.
Awesome. I've got a bit of a question about commentary for the Stampede Wrestling shows. So somebody that I've taken a great shine to was Ed Whalen. Papa Smokes and I do commentary here for Prairie Pro Wrestling, and I've started to really pick up on a lot of things that Ed did with his type of commentary. And it's very not quite the same as you see from other commentary teams or anything like that in professional wrestling today. What were your thoughts on how Ed handled himself as a commentator for Stampede?
I think Ed was very lively. He's very entertaining. He lacked probably the knowledge of some of the more serious commentators in the industry. Got guys like Gordon Soley, who really knew wrestling well, and for them, wrestling was sort of a full-time sport. Larry Matazik was another one, who was a commentator, I think, for the St. Louis promotion. So Ed wasn't as knowledgeable about wrestling, and for Ed, it was just once a week that he did the wrestling, because he was doing sports casts, and he was also commentating for the Calgary Flames hockey team. But he enjoyed it. For Ed, it was kind of a night to entertain and charm the fans, and humor the fans as well. And he had a great sense of humor, Ed, and a lot of original one-liners. So. And that made the show entertaining for most of the fans. Some of the wrestlers didn't like it, especially the heels. If Ed made something that was kind of insulting or unflattering about some of the heel wrestlers, maybe about their hairstyle or their weight or their ring appearance or something. But the wrestlers had to kind of accept that, take that with a grain of salt, because Ed had so much power, and he was the main sportscaster for Global Wrestling, which aired and televised our shows, So for the most part, guys knew they didn't disrespect Ed, or confront him, about how he portrayed them on the show. So, I thought he was very lively and entertaining. Sometimes he took some of the angles and matches very seriously. Ed was very pro babyface, and sometimes he would get so caught up in some of the miscarriages of justice, or outside interference, or if the heels were going too far in the ring. There were some times that he quit. He resigned from the show, and he did it, I think, because he felt his reputation was being exploited, and it was something that looked bad for him. When the wrestling got too out of control or out of hand, and there was particular with Bad News Allen, who was resorting probably to too much violence. Allen would be using a fork in the ring, even though he was told not to bring a fork in the ring, but he would, or brawling outside the ring. And so we had the commission kind of on our backs, and suspending Allen and suspending my dad's license a few times because he supposedly didn't have control over his wrestlers. And Ed kind of got on the bandwagon there, and as a sign of protest, he quit the show on a few occasions, just because he thought the wrestlers were getting too far out of hand. And and that it kind of hurt the image of the promotion, because when your commentator quits, and then the Boxing and Wrestling Commission is kind of overzealously fining you and suspending your license to promote, and suspending wrestlers, and then the media gets behind that as well. Those things are pretty tough to counter, and that can weigh heavily against the promotion.
That's very fair. BDJ, I'm not even going to put that question up because you already know the answer to that one, my friend. But Papa Smokes, go back over to you for the next question.
Yeah, well, you just brought up the sports wrestling commissions of the area and of the province. What was it like dealing with those back in the 80s? Sometimes they were rather troublesome to some promotions.
Yeah, I think a lot of the promotions all over North America had difficulty dealing with boxing and wrestling commissions, and they were usually appointed, in each city. So, like for us, we had commissions in Calgary, we had them in Edmonton and Regina. Some of them were easy enough to work with. They just wanted to be paid, basically, just like a tax. But others took it way too far, and they they started legislating what we could do, and it got to the point where you couldn't even use a foreign object or fight outside the ring, even though you were far away from the spectators. You're still kind of in that safe area away from fans. But we had really difficult and unreasonable commissions in Edmonton and Calgary. Um, Edmonton, the commissioner was Ron Hayter, who was also an alderman of the city, and I guess he wasn't really much of a fan of wrestling. And he would fine us left and right, if wrestlers were fighting outside the ring or if they swore on the microphone. They really exceeded their boundaries, and obviously he wasn't a fan of wrestling, and he went out of his way to make it restrictive for my dad and the wrestlers. And then they had physicians basically that had to check all the wrestlers, check their blood pressures before, and they were so inconsistent. Like one wrestler who normally had a very high blood pressure, maybe like 160 over 40 or something, shouldn't have been allowed in the ring. He would pass, and then somebody else who had fairly low blood pressure, something considerably lower, and the doctor said, "Well, your blood pressure is too high. I'm not going to let you rest. You've advertised this guy on the show, and now you have to take him out of the show." And quite often it would be a wrestler who's in a featured match. So that was difficult in Edmonton. But when we had a commissioner named Gordon Grayston, who's an ex-boxer, and he had been a referee for my dad for a number of years. But when he got on the commission, he became really power hungry, and all of a sudden, he just decided arbitrarily to fine wrestlers for any infractions fighting outside the ring, or if they did a low blow or something, used a foreign object, right? But anything that was inciting fans, anything that was getting heat with fans. And I think to a large part, these guys were jealous because my dad was selling out and drawing money. The wrestlers were making money, and the commissions weren't getting a piece of that. They thought they should be entitled to a bigger piece of the pie, even though they hadn't done anything to really warrant it, other than just being appointed, as commissioners, basically. So they went out of their way to, restrict and hold back the promotion in so many ways. And a lot of times it hurt our business considerably because we had major angles and things that were selling out all of a sudden overzealously ruled by the commission as being out of control, and they suspended my dad's license on a few occasions and put him basically out of business. When my dad, if he couldn't run shows in Calgary or Edmonton because the commission had revoked his license, and then he would have to hire a lawyer and go through a legal process and try and appeal the sanctions against him. But in that time period, a lot of damage was done. Business was killed. We had no live shows that could replace those markets. But when I speak about the commissions having a really negative impact in Alberta, I can speak to that in so many promotions. They pretty much shut down Don Owens' promotion in Portland, and Vince McMahon basically just eliminated them in all of his major cities by classifying wrestling as entertainment, not as a sport, and basically commissions then were kind of disbanded because they had no legal right to have jurisdiction over entertainment. Wrestling now is revealed to be just sports entertainment, not an actual combat sport. So that was a way that the WWF eliminated commissions a lot of their cities, right? Because they just became too power hungry and unreasonable to deal with.
And it seems like some of those guys weren't smart to the business either. Even in their position, did they not realize what was going on?
I don't think they realized the long term consequences. If they killed the wrestling promotion and we couldn't run shows anymore, there'd be less revenue for them.
Yeah.
And my dad eventually closed the promotion down in 1984 because of sanctions and restrictions by the commission, and it hurt our business so much. So then there was no more wrestling after that. So not only are we putting wrestlers out of action, wrestlers that were dependent on wrestling as a form of livelihood, but everyone who's associated with wrestling, the guys setting up the rings, the TV technicians, the TV production crew would be out of work now basically because there was no live TV production anymore, and everybody that was involved with the ticket takers, ushers, security, all those people, people that made the rings, So I don't think the commissions realized how many people they were affecting, negatively as well as themselves. But they did it basically out of spite and jealousy, and they just couldn't stand the success, I guess, that my dad and the promotion had when business was good, and they were very unreasonable and intolerable to work with, unfortunately.
If you were to give any advice to young people looking to get into the business today with the landscape of things, what is the best advice that you could give to aspiring wrestlers or people wanting to work within the wrestling industry?
Yeah, it's a tough industry now. There's a lot of different independent promotions. I guess the first thing is to make sure you're well trained. You've gone to a credible trainer, someone who's worked in the business, and you're not just being recruited by some backyard promotion. So first and foremost, get proper training, through accredited school, so something like Ohio Valley or something, where my brother Bruce ran a really good training camp years ago, Hart Brothers Pro Wrestling, which has unfortunately kind of disbanded, I guess, after around 2003 or 4. And then I guess, from there, just try and get as much experience as possible, work with some experienced guys. And, you need experience, you need that exposure to get better. And that's tough, because a lot of times you have to have a regular job just to support yourself and pay your bills, and then try and wrestle on weekends, and and hopefully you're making enough to at least break even and cover your travel and hotel costs, and you certainly can't be doing it for nothing, right? So again, I think it's really important you're working for a fairly credible promotion, and that you are getting paid to wrestle. If you're just basically wrestling for experience, but you're not getting paid, then it's probably not a credible promotion, and you're being exploited or taken advantage of. Just to perform in the ring. So make sure it's a credible promotion, and you negotiate with the promoter what you're going to get paid, and you have to kind of know your spot. If you're a guy that's been around a few years, you're a credible worker, you have a right to ask a certain salary or a minimum guarantee. Otherwise, I wouldn't work. And I think the promoter, if they realize your value and what you're going to add to the show, they'll pay you properly. So that best other advice I can give you is if you're going to wrestle, you have to look the part. And too many guys I see in the ring don't even have proper gear. They don't have tights or trunks or wrestling boots, and it's and I know that all costs money. It's an investment you have to make, but if you're going to perform in the ring, you have to look like a real wrestler, and you have to invest in good boots and gear, and most of that you have to order from the States. There might be a few places in Canada, but I think most of the better places are in the States, but get some proper boots and trunks and gear. So you look the part of a wrestler, not somebody who's going in the ring wearing sweatpants and runners, and if you don't look the part, no matter how well you perform in the ring, you're never going to have that credibility. And then invest in a good robe or jacket. And I guess there it's important. You're getting something that complements your name, your persona, and then come up with some kind of an identity that's going to be your name and that is your style or trademark in the ring, basically. But come up with something that's original, not too cliched, and maybe work with your promoters and experienced guys, and get some advice from them, about what a suitable name is. But make sure it's not a copy or rip off from somebody else. But if you're going to invest in it, make sure it's yours, it's your original trademark, and then go with that. And then I guess from there, just try and get as much exposure as possible and try and work for some of the more legitimate promotions. There are good ones in the West Coast. There's a couple here in Calgary and Edmonton where you can work for, and then I think quite a few decent independents in Ontario and Quebec where you can work for, at least in Canada. And then I guess from there, see if you can get booked in Japan, where you can get some major exposure, and it really looks good on your resume if you can say you've worked for New Japan or All Japan, and then eventually send together a tape, a compilation of some of your best matches that you've filmed, and send them out to some of the different promotions. Even WWE and AEW, they're always looking for new talent, and the best representation of your work is going to be videos of your matches that they see. So and then that's where they can really look at your potential rather than just a resume or an endorsement from another wrestler. But a video highlighting your best matches is going to be the best publicity for you, and that's the best advice I can give any wrestlers right now. And you have a window of opportunity, I'd say, from your early 20s to your early 30s, and if after that time you haven't gotten any major exposure, then I think you have to reconsider whether it's going to be a full-time profession for you or not, because you've probably passed your peak and that time frame, to get booked. And there are some exceptions, but I think you have that window of opportunity when you're pretty young and you're free of injuries, to establish yourself and get yourself over, and and try and get booked by one of the major promotions.
Awesome advice. Amazing advice. We are coming close to the top of the hour here, which means we're going to be winding up, but we do have one last question coming in from the chat, and it's our good friend Rachel Ling joining us here in the chat, who's got a question here. Rachel says, we often hear of your dad's role in Stampede Wrestling as the promoter and the son's roles as the wrestlers. Your mom was important to the success of Stampede Wrestling. Can you talk about her role through the years? Yeah,
my mom, she was the matriarch of our family of 12 kids, but she really was for the wrestling promotion as well. She did so much behind the scenes. She was my dad's bookkeeper and secretary. She handled all the payrolls for the wrestlers. She was a skilled accountant and bookkeeper. She knew shorthand. So she was on top basically of all the money coming in and out of the promotion, basically. She handled all the phone calls. She arranged the rides for the wrestlers, to get to and from the shows. Did all of that, and seldom attended the shows, herself. She wasn't a real fan of the wrestling itself. She very seldom would she actually watch any of the shows, even on TV. But she would, come to some of the parties and celebrations, like the Stampede functions and things like that. She would come with my dad, and some of those press conferences, where the world champion or a major celebrity wrestler was being honored or featured. And so, my dad and Mom would attend those functions. But she had really good relations with all the wrestlers. When they would call up to the house to find out their bookings, where their ride would be, to go to the shows. My mom would arrange all of that. She was just so organized and efficient. And that on top of raising 12 kids and running the household, was just amazing. How she and my dad did that together. Kind of a joint of running the business out of the house and raising 12 kids and staying top of the household. So, just a very intelligent, well-educated woman, who multitask on so many levels. And our family and the promotion was indebted to my mom and my dad, for all the things they sacrificed to keep the promotion going.
Well, amazing. We got just enough time, Pop Spokes. I'm going to go to you for our last question of the evening before we do our farewells here.
Sure. I was going to recommend to any viewers here too, to when you go back to watch some Stampede, don't just watch separate matches, but watch the full shows, because that's where some of the beauty of the whole post-production and everything is. You guys didn't show just the kind of enhancement matches or squash type matches that are 3 minutes of a star just putting an enhancement talent down easily. You put competitive matches on there. And the other thing I think that's really a huge draw to Stampede Wrestling that people would like nowadays was the various different styles that all came together in one promotion, because you guys were booking British strong style wrestlers such as Davey Boy, Dynamite, Billy Robinson, that kind of thing. You had tough guys from Tennessee, David Schultz and Rip Rogers and those kinds of guys. And then you were booking Japanese stars as well. You had Jushin Liger and a few of the guys coming over from Japan. That was really a draw to the fans, I think, too, is that they could see all kinds of different styles of wrestling coming together in Stampede, all under one roof.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't have said it much better than you did. Stampede was a cross section of so many different styles. Like you said, guys from the UK, which was more of a technical style of wrestling, but we just saw so many original and innovative things by Dynamite and Davey Boy that you wouldn't see in any other promotions. Just an incredible acrobatics and agility, but then different guys from Japan, right? Again, very skillful and technical wrestling, but some real agility and high flying wrestling. And then there's cross section of American wrestlers, some from Florida and Tennessee, guys like David Schultz and Danny Davis and some of them. And then occasionally some from Mexico, we would see more of a lucha libre style. So Stampede was just known as a cross section of so many different styles, and yet most guys knew how to work very well conventionally, so they could put on a decent match with anybody. And it was a win-win situation for the guys in the ring wrestling, because they got exposed to different styles and made them better performers in the ring. And it was great for the fans, who saw such a variety of different moves, and nothing looked stale, or copied from one match to another. And it was a great promotion in that sense, because it just featured so many different styles and techniques.
Awesome. Well, we are coming up to the end of the show here. We got to make way for our good friends over the Honor Ramble coming up, as Auntie Collins and Asher Pizarro are going to be talking all things Ring of Honor right after our show here. So I want to go ahead and thank you, Ross, for taking the time to sit down with us, talk Stampede Wrestling here today. I'm sure we could talk for hours about this, as Pop Spokes and I very much big fans, and very much loving everything about Stampede Wrestling and our journey, looking into it further. So thank you for your time
Well,
today.
thanks so much for having me on the show.
Thank
It,
you.
it was great, and you guys have a great show, and I'll be listening to more of your podcasts for sure. But pleasure to be on. Thanks so much.
Oh, no, really appreciate it there. But yes, thank you very much for being there. And I'm going to go ahead and Papa Smokes, let the people know where they can reach out to you, sir, moving forward.
Okay, I can be found on Elon Musk's free speech wonderland known as X. I am at smokes_papa. I can also be found on Twitch at papa_smokes_.
There you go. That's where you find Papa Smokes. My ticker's down below. I'm Bobby Bunsen. You can find me at Real Bobby Bunsen over on the X. Instagram and Threads, we're Video Bros SK, and on Twitch, Video Bro_Bobby Bunsen. You can also catch myself and Papa Smokes every Saturday afternoon, calling all the shots at Prairie Pro Wrestling. One free match every single week for you guys, as well as catch me this Sunday with Point of View, where I'm going to be doing the MLW watch along for the War Chamber matchup. So stay tuned for that. It's going to be a lot of fun. And we got a lot of great fun here on the channel coming up. WrestleMania weekend, lots of shows, lots of reviews, lots of guests joining us here. So stay tuned for that. Thank you very much, everybody, for tuning in to another edition of A Trip Through the Territories, Ring Respect Radio. That's it for us tonight. Take care, everyone. We'll see you next week.